when he was talking about contamination being child abuse and how it impacts on the womb and child right to the molecular level. I think that's really important for us to really think hard about, because that's very profound.
Hi, I'm Margot Shepherd from Fredericton. And just what Alma said about, there have been numerous studies just within the last year or so that show that stress during even pregnancy can really change the molecular makeup of the child. And so add to that contamination and so on. And what I really want to say is I've kind of struggled with the whole question of, are we putting all of the pressure for solving the non-Indigenous caused problems of the world and Canada on the backs of the people of the First Nations? And I really don't know how to reconcile that, because I think we have similar aims, and really what we need to do is start to understand one another better and stay together. But I think we have to be very careful of how we offload our own responsibilities onto the Indigenous peoples.
I'm Jennifer, and I work at Kairos. I wanted to pick up on that point too, because that was the most resonant piece for me. I mean, I admit to an incredible sense of gratitude for the leadership that has been shown across the country, and in Idle No More, particularly in terms of environmental protection. And yet, I think a very important caution that we don't abdicate our own responsibilities as settler communities to advocate for environmental regulation to Indigenous communities. We work together. We work together. So with Indigenous law, Indigenous wisdom, we work together as settler communities to advocate for strong environmental protection and law, and in this sense of a shared country. So I think that was a really important caution, and also a really important caution that the legal victories that many of us hold up, they don't always go our way, and we need to be cautious about that. And that's not the only mechanism we can rely on. So I think it's telling us that as we look to the future, that we need to rebuild some of the environmental regulation and strength in this country that was taken away over the last period of time, and that's a critical task for us together.
Hi, I'm Ann Pohl. I'm from Kent County. There were 4 points that I think were really important to me from that video. One was the talk about fracturing society. I hope Kenneth and Katrina will be able to talk a little bit more about that, but certainly we experienced that very deeply in Kent County. We saw how the state moved against us, and we saw how the police force and the private security really moved in to separate us, to fracture our society. They didn't succeed, but they certainly did their very best. I was interested in all the discussion around the capture, because we have this issue here, of course, that I was speaking to last night of New Brunswick being a captured state in terms of corporate control of everything. So I was interested that word capture kept coming up there on the West Coast. I was also interested in the points that have been raised both by Margot and by Jennifer. I've heard 2 things recently about this business of non-native or settler people sort of being able to rely on our allies in Indigenous communities to move forward with the environmental protection agenda because of Section 35, because of UNDRIP, and because of the other ways in which the law protects Indigenous people's rights to speak for the environment, even if not protect it. At the same time, reading Naomi Klein's book, right in the middle of the book, she gets into that conversation, if people have read it. And she says, you know, yeah, they're there, those things are there, and First Nations do seem, or Indigenous people do seem to be willing because of who they are and what they believe and their culture and everything. They seem to be willing to step up to the plate. But we can't just leave it at that. We can't allow ourselves as non-Native people, as settlers, to let the situation of economic disadvantage and cultural disadvantage and all the other problems that are water issues, all the other problems that exist in First Nations. If we're going to rely on First Nations or Indigenous people to step up to the plate on those, for us and all of us on the environment, we have to make damn sure that we step up on all the other issues that place Indigenous people in less safe and secure living situations. Make sure they get the advantages that we get. And the other person I heard speak about this recently was Pam Palmater. I heard her speak twice on it last month. She talked about the sword and the shield. And she talked, as Caleb Ben did, she talked about the fact that it's now a totally militarized relationship between the Government of Canada and Indigenous peoples in their communities. And she said that that because of who Indigenous people are and because of what they believe in their culture, that to the last one living in Canada, we can, environmentalists, people who care about the environment and care about future generations, we can count on the fact that we have an ally there. But she said we have to realize that this is a militarized relationship, and in a battle, you need a shield and you need a sword. And while Indigenous people can be the shield, non-Indigenous people, we have the numbers, settlers, we have the numbers, we have the skills, we have the networks, we have the contacts, we have the education, but mostly we have the numbers. And so we have to be the sword. We have to be right there behind the shield, and we have to speak up. And so this takes me back in a loop to the fractured, because I saw how the state moved against us in the battles in Kent County. I saw how the state moved against us to separate the sword from the shield in very concrete ways.